Hi, everyone. Before we get started, I'd just like to say a big hello. Thank you all for tuning in. Let me introduce myself. I am Dr. Sonali. I am a pregnancy wellness expert, and I have, I absolutely am passionate about helping couples through their pregnancy, through childbirth and breastfeeding. Now, being a mother of two myself, I understand exactly what the emotions and physical challenges of pregnancy are, right? And I'm sure some of you are already going through all of those. I mean, it's a wonderful time in your life, but all of these questions come up, and it's really nice to have that support consistently through your pregnancy and birth, right? So this is a milestone in your life, and your bodies are going through so much change. And if you really track back some of these postmenopausal issues that come up as you get older, they all kind of link back to pregnancy and birth, right? So what I do is I help women stay strong through this very, very critical period. And I ensure that, women are pain-free. I combine my expertise as a physical therapist. I also am trained in pre and postnatal yoga, and I'm a lactation counselor. So what I do is I combine my expertise in all of these areas to, I would almost say mentor couples through their pregnancy, through childbirth, help them have a really calm and confident childbirth, and also transition effortlessly to, the postnatal period where your journey as parents actually begin when you first start with, the challenges of breastfeeding. So I absolutely enjoy what I do, and I'm so glad to be able to connect with all of you from so many different parts of the country right now. So let me see who else has logged in since I started. Barbie from Mumbai at 32 weeks. Hi, Barbie. I like your name. Ramya from Bangalore, 36 weeks pregnant. Hi, Ramya. And Dr. Anukrati, 29 weeks pregnant. And where are you from, Anu? Dr. Anukrati, where are you from? It's just wonderful. Everyone's from so many different parts of the country. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my presentation now. So what are we here to talk about today? We're here to talk about having a positive birth experience. Okay, because you go through this wonderful time, this time when you're pregnant, and then as you get closer to your your due months, I like to call it the due months, because due dates are never set really in stone, right? It can be 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after the date you're given. So as you get closer to your due month, all these thoughts about pregnancy and birth and what it is that is going to happen in labor, really all these questions start coming up. And what are some of the things that all of you have heard about labor and birth? I would really like to get an idea about what you already know about labor and birth. So the first question I'd like to ask everyone before we go ahead is, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about labor? Painful. Okay, so Preeti says painful, Rupika says pain. That's okay, great. Anyone else? What is the first thing that comes to mind when you think about labor? Okay, so typically that's what happens. A lot of women believe that labor is going to be a really painful experience. How do I make out it's labor pain? Okay, so Priyanka is wondering how she's even going to find out that, it's labor and not something else, because of maybe some stories that you've heard about other people's birth experiences, right? Okay, so why is it? So it's very common. The birth workshop, that's what that's the workshop that I present, where we talk about all of these things. But today we're going to condense everything up, and we're going to mainly talk only about labor discomfort. Okay, so is labor painful? Why are some of the reasons, why is labor painful to begin with? And what are some of the ways in which we can manage labor discomfort? Okay, so now that we know what some of you have talked about labor itself, so a lot of people here did say that they thought labor was going to be a painful experience. Let's just think about why we have these beliefs. Why do we think labor is a painful experience? So if you really look at what's happening with the way we are programmed, a lot of us are programmed to believe that labor is painful. Okay, it's because of all the movies out there, right? It's because of all the scary birth stories that we hear sometimes from people, maybe family, maybe friends. Everybody has a friend or a family member who decides to share their birth experience when you're pregnant, not realize you're in this sensitive phase where you're really worried about how it's going to go for you, right? So all of these messages that are coming across from the universe really program us to believe that labor is a painful process, right? And look at some of the language that is used as far as birth is concerned. In some cities and in some hospitals, labor is referred to as pain. So your doctor might have told you this, that when your labor pains start, come to the hospital. How many of you have heard this? Have you heard this? Anyone here? All right, so a lot of people here are saying that, they've heard that, the doctors refer to labor as pain itself. Now, one of the things that happens when we refer to labor itself as labor pains is we start building up that expectation in our heads, right? We start thinking of it as going to be a painful experience. And the entire process of labor doesn't work very well with that expectation, okay? So let me explain what happens when you start building up that expectation of pain in labor. If you look at even what the definition of pain means, right? Why should labor be painful? Pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience that is associated with actual or potential tissue damage. Now tell me, is anything getting damaged during childbirth? Is there any real damage during the process of birth? There really isn't. There isn't any real damage, but there's a lot of stretching. There are a lot of ligaments that need to kind of, just loosen and soften and open. The hip bones need to kind of make space for the baby as the baby moves down. But there is no real tissue damage. So why does labor have to be a painful experience for any of us, right? So there is a difference between actual physical pain and anticipated pain. So pain that we build up an expectation for. Okay, so there isn't really much, if you look at whether labor is really painful or not, there is definitely some amount of discomfort because there is so much stretching, there is so much pressure, but it is not meant to be the singular most, uncomfortable experience of your life. It can be an absolutely, it's an experience that you want to look back and think that was empowering. I really was in charge of my baby's birth. I knew exactly what was happening to my body. I knew what was happening as the baby was moving down the birth passage. And each and every surge in my body, like each and every contraction that your uterus has, when you start welcoming those, you can actually go through labor and birth, in this positive state of mind where you feel that, you were the one who was really in charge of the process. So that's what we are looking at over here. How do we transform the entire birth process from being something that, you went through to something that you actually did? Okay. So let's rephrase. So the entire class today, this entire webinar is on redefining labor discomfort. Okay. So I want to redefine the way you think about labor. So let's look at why labor is painful, or is it really painful, right? So some of the sources of labor discomfort include the contractions in the uterus. Now, some of you may have seen this uterine model. Can all of you see what I'm holding up over here? Yeah? Okay, so this is a balloon, right? And some of you might have seen this on YouTube. It's been a very popular prop for childbirth classes. It was first used by Passion for Birth, and then we started using this in our classes. So this is just wonderful. Now, if you look at what is happening in labor, this is the uterus, okay? This is what your uterus looks like, okay? And this is what your baby is doing in there. So if you look at this, this is what your uterus looks like, okay? The muscles of your uterus run along the length of your uterus, and there are muscles on the inside which run along the uterus, okay? So the outermost muscular fibers run along, and the innermost muscular fibers of the uterus run across. Now the baby is in here, and your baby needs to move through the pelvis and be birthed, okay? So when labor starts, your uterus is contracting. Okay, so this is what your uterus looks like. And as labor progresses, your uterus is contracting. So if you look at what is happening to the mouth of the cervix over here, it is becoming thinner. And this is called as effacement. Your cervix needs to thin out, and then it's going to start to open, right? The mouth of the cervix is going to start opening. This is going to allow your baby to move down and out through the birth passage. Now, while all of this is happening, of course, there is some amount of pressure. You know, you're going to feel it all down over here, and that is expected. But labor doesn't have to be singularly painful. As your baby is moving down the birth passage, if you are calm, if you are relaxed, if you're welcoming these surges, your body works in harmony to allow the cervix to open without too much resistance. Okay, so we'll see how that works in a bit. So this is what is happening in labor, and some of the things that can cause the intensity of labor to increase. The most important thing that causes labor to be more painful than it needs to be is fear. And where is all this fear of labor coming from? All of this fear of labor is coming singularly from all the messages we are getting from the universe, right? So from the media, from all the movies that we've watched, what is the first thing that we see? We see the water breaking, right? And then the mom's in labor and she's rushed to the hospital. It seems like there's this constant state of emergency, but it's not. Labor unfolds in a really beautiful way. It starts in a way in which you will recognize it. If you really know the signs, right? Your body sends you a message to tell you that the baby is going to be born today or tomorrow. And from that point on, you will see all these signs one after the other. You know, some of them you may see, some of them you won't see, but at least you have a sense of what is happening to your body. When labor first begins, these uterine surges are not painful at all. They feel almost like waves of pressure. So that's what we call labor contractions. We call them waves, right? You don't want to think of them as painful contractions. You want to think of them as waves of pressure. And that's exactly what labor feels like, especially if it starts on its own. Okay, so very early on in labor, you have these gentle waves of pressure. They are purposeful. So when you look at, we're redefining pain in labor. So if you think of P-A-I-N, the first P today is purposeful. Okay, so labor contractions or these waves of pressure, they are purposeful. They are meant to make your cervix open and to allow your baby to move out of your birth passage, right? Now, labor is also intermittent. Sorry, let's look at A first. P is purposeful, A is anticipated. Labor discomfort, a lot of it is anticipated. And when I talk about anticipated pain, I mean the expectation that you have of what it's going to be like. Now, all of you have already told me that your expectation of labor is of pain, right? Now, what happens to our body is when we start thinking of something as a painful experience, it's going to be long, it's going to be bad, it's going to be uncomfortable. All of these things really build, all of these things really start making you think that it's going to be, you know, very, very difficult for you. So your body starts releasing the hormone cortisol. Okay, and what cortisol does is it causes all these inner fibers of your uterus to contract, right? So instead of relaxing, instead of releasing, allowing the baby to move down the birth passage, all of these muscles are instead going to tighten. So if you look at what happens here, when we go across, you saw what happened when the longitudinal fibers contracted. It allows the cervix to thin out. But if you think of what happens here when you're tightening around the cervix itself, it's not helping your uterus open at all. So anticipated pain, which is this expectation of pain itself. Okay, so what's happening is when you think about the anticipated pain, you're basically talking about that expectation. And if you don't have that expectation, let's not even think that labor is going to be a painful experience. Maybe it was painful for somebody else, but that does not have to be your experience, right? If you're completely in charge of the process, if you know exactly what to expect, if you have all the tools that you need to manage labor discomfort, which is, your breathing techniques, you have positions, you have these massage techniques, and most importantly, continuous partner support. Your husband or your doula continuously supporting you during the process of birth. This itself redefines the way you will experience your labor, right? So it can go from being, this expectation of pain to this expectation that I'm going to meet my baby, right? At the end of this process, I'm going to come closer to my baby. So all of these things are very important. How you think about what labor is going to be like is what it's going to unfold as. You really attract that from the universe. Now, P is purposeful, A is anticipated pain, and I is intermittent. How many of you think that labor is going to be, if you did think that labor is a painful experience, how many of you think that labor is going to be painful for the entire time that you're in labor? Is labor going to be painful all through? Okay, so Pavani thinks labor is going to be painful all through. Dipmala says, I'm not sure. So Preeti says no. Okay, great. That's good. So, the thing is that labor is not painful throughout because these contractions that we're talking about, this tightening of the uterus, it comes and goes at regular intervals. So the contraction itself may last for maybe 1 minute. In early labor, it's even shorter, maybe 30 seconds or 40 seconds. And when the contraction starts, as the labor progresses, each of these labor contractions may be for 1 minute. So you'll have this discomfort maybe for 1 minute. And even within that 1 minute, it's going to slowly get more and more uncomfortable and then become better. Okay, so even within this single contraction, you have the time to really ramp up to peak intensity and then ramp down to feeling completely comfortable. In between contractions, you have time to relax. You have time to take a breath. You have time to really, drink a sip of water, talk to your husband, laugh, giggle, whatever it is that you want to do. There is not so much discomfort in between, but only during those contractions, that's when you're really going to feel the intensity of it. And you have so many tools to help you, even at that point, to really make it much more comfortable for you. So labor discomfort is intermittent. So this is what we're talking about. We're redefining pain and labor. So labor is purposeful. It is, what's happening in labor, to just recap what we said and maybe you missed out. The cervix is opening, it's thinning out. If we redefine the way that you think about what's happening here, it's also anticipated. So it's an expectation of pain. If you think that you're in the emergency room when labor starts, you're just feeling very anxious, you're hyper alert, you're worried. During labor, you're tightening your jaw, you're tightening your shoulders. All of this is going to cause an increase in cortisol, which will bring down the amount of oxygen reaching your uterus. It's also going to bring down the amount of oxygen reaching your baby, right? We don't want any of this. If you redefine that expectation of pain and labor to, welcoming each surge, knowing that it's bringing you closer to your baby, you can now be in what I call the spa room, right? You can be calm, you can be completely relaxed. You have all these techniques to, learn how to keep your jaw relaxed, your pelvic floor relaxed. Take deep breaths. You're bringing in lots of oxygen for the baby and for yourself. And all of this is going to actually result in less pain and less discomfort in labor, right? So you're physically actually going to feel more discomfort by using some of these relaxation techniques. So just think about this statement for a second. If you can see my screen, the statement here says, I put aside all fear as I prepare for the birth of my baby. How does that sound? Isn't this so much better than thinking of labor as labor pains? Or let's think of softening, opening, releasing. You think of your cervix just becoming softer, opening to allow your baby to slip through, allowing all the ligaments, all the muscles around this area to just release, right? Now you're already bringing a sense of calm to this entire process of birth, right? So this is what we're talking about when we talk about redefining labor pain. It's purposeful, it's anticipated, and the discomfort is intermittent. It comes and goes. It's not even one big block of pain, right? It comes and goes. If you look at this next slide over here, each contraction, I like to call them waves because that's what they look like, right? It starts up slowly. It keeps building up. It reaches a point where you may feel that, oh, I need to catch my breath. But if you know all your breathing techniques, you're going to breathe through them instead, right? You're going to ride each wave with your breath. And then as the contraction, as the uterus starts releasing and relaxing, it just fades away. This entire contraction may last for 1 minute, maximum 1 to 1.5 minutes. And in between two contractions, you have about 5 to 6 minutes to just relax. You'd probably be, definitely take a sip of water, talk to your partner, talk to the people around you, laugh, giggle. All of this is going to just simply change your mindset of the process. So labor discomfort is intermittent. It comes and goes. It's not a single block of discomfort. There is a lot you can do to cope with it and really experience it very differently. So think about this for a second. If you look at this positive affirmation, here comes another wave and I'm going to ride it. So each time your uterus goes into a surge, each time you have a contraction in your uterus, just think about it as a wave that you need to ride. Breathe through it, right? Smile through it. And you'll be surprised at how much more comfortable you experience it to be. So think of it as one wave at a time, and it's going to really make it much easier for you to go through the entire laboring process. And now finally, in our definition of labor pain, it's purposeful, anticipated, intermittent, and labor pain is normal. It is normal in the entire birthing experience. Okay, it's not really so much pain, it's more pressure, and it's a lot of pressure. So at some points, especially as you get closer to the point where you're going to, when the baby moves out of the birth passage, at that point you may have a lot of intense pressure. But through most of it, labor discomfort is manageable with the right tools, without medical pain relief. Okay, without an epidural, without any need for any medical pain relief. And all of these interventions, like even epidurals or any intervention that's given in labor, it has an impact on the baby. It has an impact on your recovery in the postnatal period. Right? So you really want to minimize all of these interventions. Make sure that, let's try to keep labor as natural as possible. So that's the goal of this entire course. So There are some things now, and I'm going to talk about some things that can actually intensify labor discomfort and make it more painful than it needs to be. We've already talked about fear and the effect that fear has on labor and the way labor is experienced. Now, the position of the baby also matters. And this is something that is also in your control. You have some amount of control on what position the baby will come into, right? And all of these things we talk about in our birth workshop. The way your baby gains weight through your pregnancy, the exercises that you do to make space for the baby in your hips, in your chest, in your ribs. The baby needs space to come into the correct position for birth. And the correct position for birth is what you see here on this slide. Your baby is head down. Your baby is facing in to look at your spine. And the baby's head is buried into the pelvic bowl. Okay? So this is your optimal position for birth. If your baby is turned around, and if your baby, so this is how your baby needs to be at the time of birth. If your baby is turned around, to face your belly instead of turned in to face your spine, you can actually have more pain in labor. This is experienced as intense back pain. Labor discomfort is actually not really felt in the back as much as it is felt in the front. It's all around the tummy. It comes like a wave, a ripple from the back to the front. You'll feel it coming from the top of your belly with pressure down towards the pelvic floor. If you're feeling a lot of back pain in labor, all you experience is pain in your lower back, it's going down the legs, it's very, very intense, then it's possible that your baby is not positioned properly. Your baby could be facing out, okay? And there are exercises to ensure that your baby is positioned well at the time of birth, which is going to absolutely improve your chances for a normal, natural birth. It's going to improve the experience that you have during birth completely. Instead of pain, all you'll feel is pressure. That's how nature has designed it. Now, why is it that labor is becoming increasingly painful? A lot of it goes to the fact that we don't do what we used to do about 100 years ago, which is simply sit on the floor and eat. Squat while we cook, right? Use an Indian toilet. All of these things used to keep the birth passage flexible, open, so much easier to birth the baby. But now we sit at a table and chair to eat. We even sit when we need to go to the bathroom. And it has really made us a lot less flexible. So exercise plays a huge, huge role in ensuring if you're allowed to exercise through your pregnancy, if you're a low risk pregnant mom, I would highly recommend doing the right kind of exercises in the safe way to keep your birth passage absolutely open at the time of birth. So it's much easier for your baby to be born. Okay? And another thing that really plays a huge role in the way you will experience labor is your position, so the position of the mother. What do you think about the position of the mother in labor? I really want some of you to answer this. Do you think you should be standing, sitting, lying down at the time of birth? Or even when labor is, when you're in the process of labor. Okay, lying down. Preeti says no idea. Okay, so Pavani says lying down. Preeti says no idea. Aisha says lying down. Okay, so the perception is that in labor, you will be lying down, right? But let me tell you, the minute you're lying down, if you can see me, the minute you're lying down, your baby is in this position. And your baby is pressing down on your spine. And that makes labor very painful. Okay? If you're standing up, now gravity is going to help bring the baby down and out. If you walk, if you go up and down stairs, and all of this you're allowed to do, especially in early labor, there's no such thing as lying down in labor. Even if you go to a hospital, a lot of times you'll see mothers, women who are pregnant, walking up and down the corridor. Okay, so that's what makes labor comfortable, allowing gravity to help your baby move down the birth passage. Right? So we really want to make sure that the baby's position is optimal for birth. Do your exercises, make sure you do your full squats, ask your doctor before you start doing them, but as soon as your doctor says it's absolutely fine to do your deep squats, you really want to get into all those exercises to bring your baby into the optimal position for birth. Redefine the way you think about labor. You're not going to be lying down through most of it. It's really instinctively your body just knows that it wants to stand. You want to walk. You might even want to squat, because when you squat, it makes your birth passage it widens it up almost by 33%. Okay? So all of these things are going to really help you experience labor very, very differently. It's going to redefine the way you think of labor. Think of labor as a purposeful event. All of these surges that you're experiencing are helping your baby move out of your birth passage. All of the discomfort, a lot of the discomfort that you experience in labor is because of the expectation that you have built up from everything that you've heard around you. Just leave out all of these birth stories. Don't listen to them. I want you to think of one positive statement about labor and birth. It could be anything. It could be soften, open, release. It could be, I'm going to have a wonderful birth. I'm going to have an effortless birth. It could be any positive statement, but keep thinking on it. Meditate on it. Write it down on little chits of paper and stick it around your house. All of these positive affirmations really make you so much more comfortable with the whole process of labor and birth, that you will actually welcome it when it comes instead of feeling scared. You will know exactly what to do because your body instinctively knows what to do. 100, 200 years ago, nobody had childbirth classes to tell you what to do. All we do in a childbirth class is teach you to trust your own instincts, right? So it's so important to redefine all of these things. So it's purposeful, it's anticipated, it's intermittent, it's not continuous, and it's absolutely normal. So welcome it. Don't get scared. Don't think that something's wrong. Everything is right over here. As labor progresses, you're going to get closer and closer and closer to actually meeting your baby and holding your baby in your arms, right? So I'm going to stop with this today, and I'm hoping that this was helpful to you. I think we went a little over time because of a few glitches that we had with sharing the lecture. I'm sorry about that, but I'm hoping that I have made some impact on some of you, on the way some of you are going to experience your labor and birth. If you have any questions, I'm going to keep the board open for questions now. So anyone have any questions? I'm happy to address them. Thank you, Aisha. I'm happy to know you found this helpful. Address Ramya's questions. Can you tell us some of the first signs of labor? Your body will signal to you in many different ways, but some of the most common ways in which your body tells you it's going into labor, one is called birth show. So a day or two before you go into labor, you may see some discharge, which is dark yellow with a little bit of blood in it. Okay, now it's clotted blood and it's mucousy clotted blood. So this is called birth show. And it's a sign that your cervix is starting to open. It's starting to soften and it's starting to release. And it may release this mucus plug. Okay, and it is sometimes, if it is just yellow, it doesn't mean anything. You may see the mucus plug through your pregnancy, but that doesn't mean anything. The minute it is tinted with blood, it means you're going to go into labor today or tomorrow. Some people may even see a big blob of clotted blood, like what you get during your period. As long as it's clotted, it sits on the tissue, this is birth show. So obviously it shouldn't be frank blood where you're bleeding, but birth show is very common a day or two before. Some women get regular contractions in the uterus. So when you get regular contractions in the uterus is regularly tightening, it means labor has started. But sometimes you may get regular contractions for about half an hour. This is another sign that today or tomorrow you're going to go into labor. Now, if the water leaks out prematurely, of course, they'll try to stop the leak. But if it is around the time that you're expecting the baby, then they'll just let you go into labor and have the baby. Yeah. Excellent. Sudhir asks, are you going to share the presentation and the recorded session? Yes, this is a recorded webinar. So the recorded webinar will be available for you to watch at any time that you log in at a later date. Preeti asks, if doctor has asked you not to exercise, will it induce naturally? It depends, Preeti. I don't know. The thing is that if you are a high-risk pregnancy, which means that you have that would mean that there is placenta previa. The placenta is very low. It is covering the cervix, so you have a very, very short cervix. It's threatening to open before the baby is ready to be born. Then in these cases, they don't recommend that you exercise, sit on the floor, put any kind of pressure that will make it the possibility of opening too soon. But if it is a normal pregnancy, then it's important for you to exercise so that labor can start on its own. And yes, exercising doesn't mean that labor will start on the date that you have been given. The truth is that women can go into labor 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after. Only 5% of women give birth on their due date if they are allowed to go into labor naturally. So there is no real hurry around this, and we can of course talk about it in more detail in the birthing classes if any of you are going to come on board with joining us online for these birthing classes. Yeah. Okay, so I think anyone who wants to really talk can. Oh, low placenta, Preeti, yes. So if your placenta is low, it will start moving up and away. It needs to move about 3 to 5 centimeters away from the cervix for you to now have a normal birth. So that is very important. Some doctors go with 3, some doctors go with 5, but 3 is what the guidelines recommend. And then, that will allow free passage for the baby to move out. Yeah. Oh, excellent, Preeti. That's great. So another thing that really works very well with, of course, your placenta is already moved up, so that's fantastic. But for some of you who may be listening in, and if you have this problem, just visualize it. Every single day, just visualize the placenta moving up and away from the cervix. And I cannot tell you how many women I know. I have helped about thousands of women over the last 10 years that I've been doing this, right? And so many times, it's simply that just makes it happen. And it may not be, but we like to, at least you didn't have the fear around it. At least you didn't have the stress around it. And it's always a win-win situation. Yeah. Nisha is 38 weeks pregnant now with low FI. Doctors advising to induce immediately. Now, you can still allow what I always recommend in such cases is take it one day at a time. Talk to your doctor about your options. If you can monitor the baby, monitor the baby's heart rate, monitor the baby's movements, and see if you can take it one day at a time to see how much more if you can get closer to 40 weeks at least, right? Because sometimes babies are just not ready to come out, and if the benefits if the risks of bringing the baby out exceed the benefits of bringing them out, then it would definitely be something you want to do with a lot of thinking and a lot of caution. And we can talk about this, Nisha, one-on-one later on, because I would need to have some background into what really is happening there before I comment fully. Okay? All right. So Bhuvana asks, can you induce labor by walking? Now, there are women who have reached their due date, who have gone past their due date, walk, and sometimes there's no sign of baby. So, of course, maintaining an active lifestyle is so important. It's absolutely essential for you and for the baby. But will it induce labor? There is no real research to support it or to refute it. There's no harm in doing it. There are other ways to induce labor, like there are acupressure points, right, which we teach in our class. And of course, I teach them only if you have reached that point where you need to be induced, where the doctor's telling you need to be induced, labor's not starting on its own, but you really want to go into labor naturally. There are acupressure points which we can work on, which I can teach you to do on your own, and they do, help with going into labor. But of course, that's on case-by-case basis. There are a lot of other ways in which you can, bring labor on. But of course, with walking, it's just exercise. So deep squats, maybe doing some duck walks, but your baby will come when it's ready. Yeah. Great. Do we have any more questions? All right. Okay, so I'm going to wait for maybe another minute to take more questions. Can you all tell me, can some of you who are logged in tell me if you thought that this was helpful? I'm going to ask them to put a poll up there saying yes or no or maybe somewhat. Can we do that? I'd like to have a quick poll on whether this session was helpful. Excellent, excellent. I'm just so happy. I can't tell you how passionate I am about helping, couples through this phase. And if you notice, I keep saying couples because this is a journey you both are taking, you and your husband. Okay. So in our birthing classes, you can, if you want to know more about me, you can also check out www.BirthBasix, BirthBasix.com. Of course, we'll be doing these birthing classes through nbirth and their online classes. I also do classes in person in Chennai, and we just putting it online gives access to so many more people around the country. I think it's a great way to really educate yourself with evidence-based principles on birth. There's a lot of information out there, right? Google. Dr. Google. There's a lot of information out there, but is it accurate? There are a lot of studies being thrown out there, but was it a good study? Was it a robust study? You cannot, just because it was published, it doesn't mean that it's something that applies to you. It may have been a very small sample size. Maybe that it cannot be generalized to the general population, right? So there is a lot when it comes to, really be a critical consumer. That's what I always tell people. Be a critical consumer of the information that's out there. And what we do with our childbirth classes is bring you evidence-based information. Information that is going to, there's no trial or error. It simply works. Okay, so you're going to really know how to confidently take charge of your labor and birth experience, how to experience labor with an absolutely positive outlook, eliminate fear from your vocabulary. 2 things I want you to eliminate today from your vocabulary about labor and birth is pain and fear. Okay? And absolutely learn techniques that will make your partner more empowered, make him understand how to support you through this journey and transition into parenthood. So you're both doing this together. It's not you in labor, it's both of you in labor. All right? Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to be logging out right now. And if any of you want to reach out to me, please do so through my Facebook page or through my website. I'm happy to answer your questions. You can also reach me through nbirth. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talking to all of you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.